We're going to get into the details of market failure more in future videos, but I want to list and discuss a little bit now to give you kind of a preview. The first of the market failures I want to mention is the asymmetric information problem. This is where one of the parties knows more about the transaction than the other party, whether it be buyer or seller. And when there's an asymmetric information problem, we have a market failure. We do not have an efficient transaction. An example of this is a story about a young couple who decided to buy a house in upstate New York. Now, they had lived most of their life in the city, and now they had a chance to go out into the world outside of New York City and buy a place in the country with fresh air and some land. Well, the realtor showed them a house, and they couldn't believe their eyes. It was a mansion, huge place, on beautiful grounds, and well constructed. And the price, it was so cheap. They could not believe how inexpensive it was. And so they bought it. And then about 3 months after they bought it, they filed a lawsuit against the previous owner of the house and the realtor. And they said, "You didn't tell us everything." And they took it to court, and the judge ruled in their favor because they were making a claim that the house was haunted. Now, they realized that the house wasn't haunted, and the judge knew it wasn't haunted, and the owners knew it wasn't haunted. But nevertheless, the judge ruled in their favor. Now, why would this be? Because, you see, the people in the town believed it was haunted, and they would not treat this young couple well because they were living in a haunted house. This represented an asymmetric information problem. So for an economy to operate efficiently, there has to be full information that's relevant, available to all parties. A second area of market failure that's quite commonly discussed is monopolies or oligopolies. This is where there's one major producer of a good, and they're supposedly taking advantage of the public by overpricing. We saw a situation like this not too long ago involving pharmaceutical industry and the production of EpiPens. Now, EpiPens are used by people who have severe allergies in case they get into a crisis, peanut allergies and so forth. I have a couple of them because I have an allergy like that to seaweed, which is unfortunate because I really like Japanese food. I just can't eat it because I'm at risk. Even if there's no seaweed added, often the producer of the sushi has been handling a lot of seaweed, and the seaweed is transferred into the food. This is used as an example by people who point to the market and say, this is a market failure. Look, the market failed. But if we dig deeper, what we discover is that this was not a market failure, but a government failure. And the reason why is because we had the Food and Drug Administration, who was regulating the production of these kinds of EpiPens. When this one company ended up being the only one producing them, if anybody wanted to compete, they had to go through a multi-year process to be approved by the Food and Drug Administration, meaning that other people were locked out of production. Well, that's not the market. That's the government doing that. And that's why we had the problem. The market tends to solve these things very quickly. Now, there are two types of monopolies. We'll learn more about those later in terms of which ones are a failure and which ones aren't. Another market failure is the principal agent problem. Now, this is where you hire an agent to represent you, and the agent, being Homo economicus, decides that there's something that they can do that's better in their self-interest and that's not in your self-interest. So, for example, I might hire a real estate agent to sell my house. Now, the real estate agent would like to sell the house very quickly, get their commission, and move on to the next house. But I want them to take a little time and get a really high price. We have different objectives. In this particular case, we have a principal agent problem. Unless I can find a way to align the incentives of my agent with mine, I'm going to have that problem. And we can have these problems with doctors and with lawyers and with auto repair personnel. Another area of market failure is negative externalities. Now, externalities are where the producer of a good or service does not internalize the full cost of their production. This is an important definition. Write it down. Where the producer of a good or service does not internalize the full cost of their production. This will be on an exam. Now, there's also positive externalities, which, by the way, are also a failure. I know you wouldn't think so, but they are. This is where the producer of a good or service does not internalize the full benefit of their production. And each of these two externality types cause different problems. The negative externality imposes costs on people who shouldn't be experiencing those costs. This could be something like pollution. With a positive externality, the public suffers because it causes less of that good to be produced, an underproduction problem, because the producers are not receiving the full benefit of their production. One of the most important concepts that we're going to learn this semester is the idea of efficiency, the idea of reaching a point where we are as efficient as possible in our production. Efficiency has to do with optimality. What is the optimal amount of production or the efficient amount of production? Now, this could be very confusing because, for example, I could say, what is the optimal amount of air pollution? And you might quickly respond, well, no air pollution. And I would say to you, no, that would be ideal. That's the ideal amount of air pollution, but it's not the optimal. The optimal has to do with the cost of reducing this air pollution versus the benefit of having cleaner air. And when the cost to reduce the air pollution exceeds the benefits of the incremental improvement in air pollution, then we have to stop. It's just not efficient anymore. Let me express it a different way that might shock you. What's the optimal number of murders in Muncie, Indiana each year? Again, you may quickly say, 0. We don't want any murders. And the answer would be, no, that's not right. Because you see, what will it cost us to make sure there are no murders? Well, we might have to put everybody in a padded cell. I don't think we're prepared to have that cost. And so what we have to look at is how many more police, how much more do we have to spend to reduce the number of murders by 1? Well, at some point, we might have to spend billions of dollars. And that money could have been spent on other things like food, taking care of the poor, medicine, better roads. And we just can't afford it. And so what we're looking for is optimality. Now, to have optimality, we have to measure the efficiency. We need to think about how do we measure efficiency. We're going to learn that there are a number of different techniques, and they have been developed by different economists over time, and they have different benefits and weaknesses. But that's for another video.